But let's start with the fun. How was the crypto inaugural ball?
Yeah, I mean, I just came from DC yesterday, and I mean, the energy was palpable, as you can imagine. We co-sponsored the crypto ball there, and it was just an incredible event, tons of energy. It felt like the boot had been lifted off our throat in a way, right? Like the last 4 years, the lack of clear rules, I think, was really weaponized by Gary Gensler and some folks in the administration. And it felt like, we repeatedly petitioned them for clear rules, like people wanted to build companies, and it was all getting pushed offshore because they were really kind of unlawfully attacking the industry, trying to kill it, in my view. And so it was a ton of energy and enthusiasm about this new direction, like a new SEC chair that's pro-crypto, people like David Sachs as the crypto czar, all throughout the new administration. And so we're going to keep pushing and try to get some clear legislation passed. That's our next big goal in this administration, to actually codify it in law so that it's permanent. It's not something that could flip back and forth like a political football every few years.
How are you and others in the industry thinking about your relationship with President Trump?
Well, I mean, we want to work with anybody who's in government, right? That's what we really tried to do in the Biden administration. I go to DC about once every quarter. We tried to get meetings. We really had a hard time getting meetings, frankly, in the last administration. In this administration, they seem to be very willing to meet with us and at least have a dialogue. Doesn't mean they're always going to do what we want, but just at least to be heard and understood is a good partnership between public and private sector. So we're going to continue to try to invest in those relationships, just like we do with governments all over the world.
Will you list President Trump's meme coin?
So we've said publicly already that we do plan to list it. You shouldn't take any listing of a coin as an endorsement. We try to have listing standards that are a level playing field for all assets. And then if you meet the listing standards, which are around compliance and security, then it's up to the market to decide what to trade. So we're not registered investment advisors. We operate an exchange.
So there are some people in the industry look at meme coins and think that it's not serious. That you're trying to build a serious financial infrastructure and make some serious changes, and you write a lot about economic freedom and sort of serious weighty topics, and then there's Peanut the squirrel and Pepe the frog and all kinds of stuff that has a somewhat less serious bent to it. How do you think about it?
Yeah, well, crypto is going to be many different things. So, Bitcoin is the new gold standard. It's a refuge from inflation. It's a core primitive in this new financial system. And stablecoins are making payments faster and cheaper, more global. Now, meme coins is just one of many areas. There's NFTs and ICOs. Like every few years, there's something really interesting happening in crypto. And it's hard for me I agree, I don't think all of it is very serious, nor does it have to be, right? Things that are more like artwork or collectibles, like baseball cards or things like that, I think that's fine if people want to put out art and have people collect it. I don't have any issue with that. And the other thing I would just say is, like, we always have to be a little cautious about judging. Like a lot of innovation comes from play and experimentation. Mm-hmm. If you look at the early things people were building on the internet, it didn't look very serious. It was like animated GIFs and cat photos and silly things. And now 20% of all GDP is running on the internet of e-commerce, right? So I think that, memes are actually kind of interesting. Like, they seem to be a very condensed form of information that can go viral, and messaging spreads through memes. It's a way for people to poke fun at authority or ideas whose time has come. And so I don't know exactly what will happen with meme coins. I'm not I don't personally trade them, but I don't want to discount it too early if there's something, that's percolating.
I mean, one difference obviously between meme coins and fun things on the internet in the past is you couldn't lose a lot of money on fun things on the internet in the past. But you can on meme coins.
You might remember, a lot of people got emails about the Nigerian princes, and there was a lot of fraud happening early internet as well, as people learned and adapted to things. But look, I don't want to minimize the issue. I think there are a lot of consumers that have been hurt in crypto. FTX blew up. There's been ICOs that were scammy. So these things are something we're trying to really correct. And the way you do it, I think, is by getting clear regulation, and that has to come from Congress. Clearly, the agencies are not really, they don't have the motive to kind of publish clear rules on their own, and we want it to be in law, and then the regulators can go enforce the law. So I think Coinbase has tried to be a good actor to help clean up the industry, to do reasonable things even in the absence of clarity that we think might be or should be required later. But yeah, you're right. The industry's had some bad actors, and we're trying to fix that.
So let's dive into the regulatory stuff, because I find the regulatory stuff fun, and I assume you do too. So
I've come to enjoy it more over time, actually. I didn't initially.
You start as a technologist, and then you become a regulationist.
Yeah. I mean, I studied computer science. I was really like a software engineer. I studied economics, and when I first started Coinbase, I naively sort of thought, well, we just like follow the law, and we get to build products for our customers, and then we don't have to ever worry about the government, right? Turns out it's more nuanced than that, because anything sufficiently innovative is eventually going to bump up against government, and you have to engage with. So now we're just we've completely reversed this in the last 3 years, and we have, I think, the best policy team out there, and we built a whole grassroots movement, or helped it get off the ground with standwithcrypto.org, that had 2 million advocates in this recent election. We had, this Fair Shake was a super PAC that I think had more. I think it was like the highest, bipartisan PAC dollar amounts in the last election. So we've fully embraced this policy effort as we kind of got beat up on the playground the last 4 years.
So what are there are a bunch of things that are on the table at the moment. There's Fit 21, sort of how do you think about the security commodity question that has bedeviled you guys for a while. There's stablecoin regulation. There's a wide range of things. Mm-hmm. What are, if you had to as you list your legislative and regulatory priorities, like what's at the top of that list? Yeah.
Well, I think you nailed a couple of them. So I think we do have an opportunity here in the next 6 months to try to really get some legislation going. For those of you who follow U.S. politics, in the House of Representatives, we got a bill passed last year. When I say we, I mean the crypto industry, the government itself, like everybody working together. And it passed the House, but it didn't get through the Senate. And so now that we have a new Congress, you're kind of starting from square one. Mm-hmm. The good news is that there's strong bipartisan support to get legislation passed, and the key principles that I think are coming together are the ones you mentioned. So the first one is what I would call token classification, which is these are commodities, which are securities, which are something else entirely like artwork, which don't need to be regulated by either of those two other categories. And getting the definitions of those it's tricky and it's nuanced. And I've seen some draft language getting sent around. I'll give you like my high level way I think about it, which is a little different than how you might write it in law. But if you're actually raising money for a company, like you want to make an apartment complex or a tech startup or a movie or something, and you're a centralized group of people trying to build something in the world, you're raising money from investors, that is a security. You should have to register it as a security. There should be all the consumer protections that come with that, the disclosures. And we've been actually petitioning the SEC for 4 years to try to make a pathway for that to happen, but they were not willing to do it until hopefully now. Now, once something becomes sufficiently decentralized, I think it can become a commodity. And the reason is that there's no, like Bitcoin, for instance, there's no central group that is in control, and you don't have this information asymmetry between the people using it and the people building it. It's truly decentralized. So I think there could actually be a decentralization test that would allow something to be a commodity and not a security, and there could be different prongs to that test. And then artwork, would be another category. Stablecoins would be another category. So these are the core components of a bill.
So you really need you're essentially proposing a remaking of the kind of standard classification, which goes back to, almost 100 years of security commodity. You're opening up some new forms of tradable assets. Is that how you really need a big legislative overhaul? Is what you're
Well, I don't think it's an overhaul. I'd say it's not going to replace, there's like the 1934 Act that kind of created a lot of the securities law. It would build upon that. So I think it preserves that, and then it's really this new thing which wasn't contemplated in the law previously, because the securities law in the U.S. was written because of orange groves and things, and people were like, are the oranges the oranges are a commodity, but if you make an investment contract to buy them, that's a security. So these 1934, like the internet didn't exist, none of it, right? So we're in this world now where now you can raise money for something, and then it can actually decentralize over time, and it needs to have a pathway to convert from one to the other. This is what a new bill, I think, would clarify in the law.
So you would be roughly suggesting that sort of primary listings, like a public offering of something where you're raising money, that should have more regulation than secondary market trading of stuff that has already been offered.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that.
And that would, how would you want those decisions to be made about what what in the secondary market trading sits over here as a security, over there as a commodity, over there as artwork? Is that stuff that has to be determined in advance, or is it something that the courts will assess?
Well, okay, so you're getting into the edge of my knowledge
we're deep
here.
into regulation
Yeah, but
details.
there were
We'll
some
pull
recent,
out of this in a second. Okay. Don't worry.
I'm gonna have to bring in the lawyers here in a second.
No, please, let's not. With
There's-
all apologies, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, there actually were some court cases. Federal judges in the U.S. ruled that the secondary transactions were permissible, and they were not securities. I think there could be a pathway to do that, but you're getting kind of to the edge of my legal knowledge here.
Let's jump to stablecoins, which is the other thing that is a big priority of the industry, and I'm sure of you as well, to have some legislation that establishes what is the structure, the regulatory structure for a stablecoin, which in a lot of ways looks like a money market fund, looks like a bank product, but isn't quite, and so some regulatory framework around that, I think is central to the industry because stablecoins act as settlement currencies, they act as payment currencies. One of the issues is that the major stablecoin, the largest one on your platform, Tether, has had, we've reported that they're facing inquiries by the Department of Justice. There have been a number of questions about transparency, custody of assets, and other things. Can you build a new digital asset infrastructure on top of something like Tether?
Well, the stablecoin that we prefer is actually USDC.
Right.
And we have a great partnership with Circle, the issuer of that coin. Tether has been very successful, I'd say, in more like emerging markets, and USDC has been more successful in developed markets. And I think it's hitting a higher bar of compliance. Some of the things that might end up being prongs in this U.S. legislation around stablecoin would be it needs to be 100% backed by U.S. Treasuries, if you have some of it in Treasuries, but you have some of it in Bitcoin and some of it in corporate paper, that's more like a hedge fund. That's not a stable coin. So I think you'll see a 100% reserve requirement potentially. Pass an audit periodically. Have some sort of you probably would need to create it in like a state trust, or a bank could issue it, but it doesn't have to be a bank because you're not doing fractional reserve. So there's components like that that would show up in a stablecoin law, and I think it's actually imperative for the U.S. dollar, reserve to maintain its reserve currency, to try to digitize it and have it be adopted in more places around the world. Of course, we want crypto to be adopted by everybody, but from a U.S. perspective, when we speak with government there, they are quite concerned about the digital RMB in China, and they've started to advance that into other countries and start to have it used in more places. So I think crypto is going to help the dollar as a stable coin, digitizing it. It's also going to help the dollar by having a check and balance on inflationary spending and deficits, by having Bitcoin be an asset that's provably scarce people can flee to in times of uncertainty, which is kind of another thought.
So you recently delisted Tether in Europe to comply with MiCA, the European regulation that sits atop digital assets over there. Do you anticipate something similar in the U.S., that the direction of travel in the legislation is such that Tether doesn't comply with what either the legislation requires or what you think is appropriate?
Yeah, so if legislation in the U.S. was passed and Tether couldn't come into compliance, we'd probably have to delist it. There is a reason why we would want to continue to support it, though, which is just that there are a lot of people with Tether, and we want to give them an off-ramp. If we want to help them transition to a system that we think is more secure, or I have nothing negative really to say about Tether. I think they've been incredibly successful, and different approaches can work in different countries around the world. So I actually think they've been doing great. But for people who do want to switch, there should be an easy off-ramp or on-ramp, right? And so that's partly why we'd like to continue to support it for some time. But if the U.S. legislation blocks that, we'd have to delist it.
Do you think that there's adequate KYC and controls around Tether and for anti-money laundering, sanctions violation, that sort of stuff?
That I unfortunately don't have enough information on. You'd have to ask them that. I've read some of your reporting on it, or the journal's reporting and others, but I honestly don't know.
I want to change topics almost entirely.
Great. Let's talk about something more cheerful.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about culture. First, actually, we'll talk about corporate culture in a second, but I want to talk about America. And we'll start with America, but we talk about the rest of the world also. I think it's fair to say that what we saw in the U.S. election was not just a kind of policy preference or of voters deciding that they preferred this set of crypto asset regulation to this set of crypto asset regulation. It was a cultural moment and fit in with other cultural moments that were happening in the United States, are happening in the United States right now. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you see crypto's place in the sort of cultural firmament at this moment?
Yeah, I think there was a shift broadly toward freedom, right? And so that was freedom of speech. It was also economic freedom. People wanted the ability to store their own wealth in a way that it couldn't be taken from them, or they couldn't get debanked or deplatformed in the crypto space. I think that it was a desire for smaller government and to make government more efficient. They felt like there was 400 or 500 different departments, and somehow they were adding one or two of them every year. Nobody even knew how many of these things there were. And I think people had this sense that the government is just not very efficient at actually operating or building anything. The role of government should actually be limited to setting policy and let the private market implement a lot of these solutions. Or Milton Friedman kind of classically said there should really only be three functions of government. It's have a military to defend from foreign invasions, have a police force to help enforce contracts at home, and then have a court system like a Department of Justice. And so what are the other 400 plus departments doing? And it's a little bit of what we saw with President Milei in Argentina, which I think has helped turn their economy around. And it's not an accident that President Milei was at the inauguration, and the Department of Government Efficiency is taking inspiration from that and other areas. So I'd say the U.S. made a big shift toward economic freedom. And to me, that's actually what has made America strong. By the way, the mission of Coinbase is to increase economic freedom in the world. It's part of what I've been here at Davos talking to people about. I think that's what has made America strong is a higher degree of economic freedom, where people can go try crazy ideas, right? And if you get too many regulations, they can really kill innovation. The lowest economic freedom countries, the poorest people in the world are the worst off. The environment is the worst off. So there's a lot of good research on economic freedom that indicates this is a foundational to having prosperity in society, and that's what I think crypto can actually do is create economic freedom for countries all over the world.
Is there, if you think about crypto, the crypto voting bloc politically, you have priorities as a company, as a big leading company in the space, but presumably most voters don't think about the policy, these sorts of regulatory policy questions. What is your assessment of what most crypto voters want from crypto? I mean, they want lots of things.
Yeah.
But what are they looking for?
Yeah, well, this grassroots movement I mentioned, standwithcrypto.org, was able to get to about 2 million advocates. And I think if you ask people why they raised their hand and said, I want to elect pro-crypto candidates, I think they would say that they felt like their rights were being taken away. That they wanted to use this new technology, that they were being persecuted for it, that people would say, well, you should trust the traditional financial system, but they were seeing banks periodically blow up, like Silicon Valley Bank, right, or in the Great Financial Crisis, or Signature Bank. Some of these people were actually getting debanked. I don't know if you tracked this. People refer to it in the U.S. as Operation Choke Point 2.0, but due to pressure from the regulators and probably folks like Elizabeth Warren, banks were actually deplatforming folks and companies using crypto in the U.S. unlawfully. I mean, they weren't breaking any rules or laws. It was a soft pressure that was applied to them that was essentially bypassing. If you want to get a law passed, you have to go through Congress. That's what the Constitution requires. You should not be able to go into some regulator and pressure them to de facto create a law and debank all these people. And so there was real, genuine anger and frustration at all of that, and I think that Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren played a big role in costing the Democrats the election, because there's no anti-crypto. They were very anti-crypto, and it's not like you're going to get a bunch of votes. There's no anti-crypto
block, right?
But there is a huge pro-crypto voting block. That was proven in this last election.
I think I would imagine that the argument from not that I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I imagine the argument on the other side of that is, well, the regulations exist for a reason, and the United States has had banking regulations and securities regulations for 100 years because philosophically the government believes that individuals should be I want to say restricted from, but maybe restricted from is the right word, restricted from making bad decisions with their own money.
Yeah.
And I imagine you would argue that no, that restriction should be pretty minimal. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably lean more libertarian on this because I think, it can become I understand the intention of it, but you have to judge these policies based on not their intention, but their results, right? Like, look at the accredited investor laws in the U.S., for instance. So to invest in a private company or a security, you have to be an accredited investor, which basically means that you're already wealthy. You have a certain minimum amount of net worth. This is, it's a regressive policy. I mean, it's really like saying the only way you can get rich off these things is if you're already rich. It excludes the poorest people in society from some of these great investment opportunities. Now, there's also a lot of bad investment opportunities. The whole point of investing is like, there's risk and there's return. And so there's anything with zero risk has a lower return, right? These are kind of foundational principles. So if you have a society where people believe, well, the government is getting rid of all the bad investments, they're going to be less diligent about, looking at each investment that they might make. So if you start to pare back the paternalistic society, you'll sometimes have these moments where, people get caught up in scams and things, but it'll quickly normalize. Like the people learn very quickly about, if I go to this restaurant, it has bad service, and I spend my money over here. Like the best regulator sometimes is actually the free market because there's ruthless competition for these customers, and you actually want to have a very low barrier for new people to come in and try to offer a better product at a lower price, right?
I'm going to take a question or two in a minute, but I want to ask. So put your thinking caps on. We'll take a question. One hand is already up in the back there, very fast. But I want to ask you about corporate culture also, because you in 2020 you had a sort of internet famous moment of talking about the Coinbase corporate culture, which in a lot of ways was, I think, ahead of what happened to in a bunch of other companies 4 years later, and not to put words into your mouth, but I think a lot of it was about how Coinbase has a mission, and the mission of Coinbase is important, and the other parts of your life you should live on your own and not have them be part of the office, sort of bring your whole self to work versus not bring your whole self to work, and you were very much on the not bring your whole self to work side.
Bring your best self to work.
Bring your best self to work. How do you feel about that now with 4 years distance?
I think we were prescient on that issue. We took some arrows at the time, but it was absolutely the right call, and I think many other big tech companies have followed in that, and so I'm glad we did it. I think it was an important moment. There was something really insidious happening really in society at that time, where I think a lot of people who were joining companies, they didn't really see it as their job to help advance the mission of the company. They saw it as their job to hold truth to power or to come in and send demand letters to leadership. There's even there's a class of employee that are actually like professional union organizers essentially, and they'll kind of like fake interview to try to get a job in the company and then start to organize it with the protections, knowing that it's difficult to let them go at that point. So, you can't really build a successful company if you have a bunch of people in there with their own priorities and missions all going in separate directions. You need to have clear alignment and everybody rowing in the same direction.
Do you feel that people at Coinbase need to have that kind of libertarian view that you're espousing to be successful at Coinbase?
Not necessarily. I mean, our mission is to increase economic freedom, so I want people to be passionate about that. Mm-hmm. But there's people on all sides of the political spectrum that are really excited about that. I mean, people on the left, it's truly a bipartisan issue. The people on the left are really excited about it in terms of financial inclusion, banking the unbanked, equality of access and opportunity, like lifting people out of poverty. And I think there's lots of people on the right that are excited about it, just in terms of like, let's have more economic growth. Like there's national security arguments why this is essential, and then there's libertarians. There's everything. So crypto is really for everyone. But we do want people to be at least excited enough about the mission to come work on it.
To sign up.
Yeah.
Another thing that you wrote in that memo that made an impression on me at least was that you asked everybody to assume the best intent of their coworkers, and that there was that I think you were perceiving that there was a rush to sort of demonize your coworkers based on what they said or how they thought, and you were sort of calling for everybody to kind of like just we're all on the same team together, like assume that the person with the oars next to you in the boat is also rowing. What are some other just sort of like tips for how you try to encourage that kind of culture at a workplace?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a very simple one, but I've coached a lot of people on this, and I think it's helped inside Coinbase, which is, you're working hard, people are doing lots of different things. Written communication can often be misinterpreted, right? So if you're using Slack or email, or if someone's, even if in your personal life, if someone's texting you, occasionally you get in this kind of thing back and forth, where like, wait, no, that's not what I meant, like this. And then you start to see like a little text thread. It's things to discuss over text are better. They're like, hey, can you get this back to me by end of day? Sure, those are good things. The minute it gets into any kind of nuanced conversation, I'm like, pick up the phone. Yeah, it sounds simple, but a lot of more junior people on the team, they don't know, it's okay if I call them? Like, yes, pick up the phone. Once you can hear the tone of someone's voice, like a lot more the best is face-to-face. Yeah. The next best is voice. The next best would be text, right? And you just miss so much. Somebody could write something in text like, oh, like, nice job on that project. And you think like, oh, they're dissing me, or they're being sarcastic or something. And like, I guess that's why you have to use a lot of emojis, but yeah.
Are we going to go to questions? Over in the back, you had your hand up first.
Thank you.
Just shout. Oh no, we got a microphone coming.
Thank you. Hydra Manon, CEO of Big TXN from London. Thank you for your thoughts. We have a Herculean task ahead of us, which is almost an inevitability, the replacement of the traditional financial markets with digital asset infrastructure. How do you see that happening, and what timeline do you put to that?
I don't really see it as a replacement. I think it's pretty complementary. You may disagree on this, but for instance, the Bitcoin ETFs came out recently in the US, and it was hugely complementary. A lot of like Wall Street folks were kind of asking me, isn't this going to be cannibalizing your trading revenue or something? And it actually turned out to be the opposite. Like $50 billion flowed into the Bitcoin ETFs. The BlackRock one, I think, was the largest in the first year, which like broke all the records. And a bunch of money flowed. Coinbase did better. We saw increased trading volume and share. By the way, and we also we powered the custody underneath for BlackRock. So it was entirely additive. We want, I really want crypto to update the financial system globally, and that means it's going to have to integrate with every traditional financial service firm. Many of them are already doing it, by the way. The card networks, the big banks, the fintech platforms, PayPal, Stripe, Cash App, Robinhood, all have crypto integrated now. This is good. We want this to happen. The only way we're going to really update the financial system is to integrate with every company.
Thank you. That partly answers my question. The thing that I wanted to kind of focus on was, yes, ETFs are fine in their place, and there's only so much Bitcoin, so there are only going to be so many ETFs in the end. However, I think what I was trying to say was structured products, for example. Great example, right? The issuance of structured products today is done primarily on mainstream exchanges. When do you see that becoming like a digital thing, when they're natively issued on digital exchanges?
With clear legislation, hopefully in the next few years.
One more question in the back. Go for it.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Cohn. I'm an executive coach, so I'm curious, of course, about the leadership aspect of when you made that very unpopular at the time decision. Was it a decision you made by yourself or with your executive team? And didn't you have some trepidation? It was so counterculture at the time, and what was that like?
Yeah, I had a lot of trepidation. It was very scary. So we had, at one point we had 300 employees walk out, and I had never experienced that before, and I was actually a little confused by it because many CEOs subsequently, I've talked about this, they would do these open mics, and it's actually a little dangerous to have an open mic at like a large, if you have like 50, 100, maybe 500 people, it starts to feel like, hey, we're all on the same team. This might be something in human psychology, like Dunbar's number, right? You start to get like thousands of people, and these little factions will sometimes develop, and you'll get people who play this game at the company town hall, which is like, how much can we make the leadership team squirm on stage, right? And I noticed a lot of the questions we were getting they weren't about like our products or regulation, or they were about societal issues like police brutality or something. And so when employees did the walkout, I was like, what? This company has nothing to do with police brutality. Why are they walking out? And we had everybody come back to the office, but I didn't feel good about it. Something felt wrong, and I was thinking, I've messed something up here. Either this is now the job of a CEO in 2021 or whenever it was, and frankly, I don't think it's very fun. So either I need to leave or I need to change something in the company. And I talked to a few people, my board and others, and they were like, no, if you think this is not what the company should be doing, there's probably a bunch of other people who are afraid to speak up, and they're silent, and they need to go. You don't need to go. They need to go. And so I started writing down a few drafts, and that's when it helps me collect my thinking. I remember I shared some of the drafts with some of our executives, and some of them were like cautiously optimistic. Some of them were like begging me not to post it. I met with some of our employee resource groups. They seemed more cool with it than, it was some of the activist folks inside the company. They were telling me like, underrepresented minorities will never work at this company again. You're killing the company. Like, it was very extreme. And when I met with the ERGs, like they didn't feel that way. They were like, yeah, we actually want to just focus on work and learn and develop in our careers. So I had a sense that it would really piss off the world, but it would actually probably only lose like 5-10% of the company, and the remaining 90% would then be fully aligned, and we could get back to working. And so, I guess it was one of these like very contrarian calls. I think within a few weeks, like the New York Times wrote this article saying we were racist, implying we were a racist company. We got lots of attack pieces from journalists. But ultimately, I think it was one of the best things I ever did for the company. It clarified what we were all about, but it also was like this incredible leadership moment, which I didn't fully anticipate the impact of at the time. So I think, a little bit of autism helps sometimes, and then a little bit of courage.